Medical innovation starts with medical discussion. Talking about the future and what comes next with Project MedTech.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lindsay Deneen, Director of Marketing and Engagement at Project MedTech, and welcome to another episode of the Project MedTech podcast. If we can help you in any way, or you would like to suggest a future guest, you can email us at info@projectmedtech.com. If conversations like this are helpful, that's exactly why we bring people together at our signature events, the Midwest Showcase, the Startup Symposium, and Coming to America. For more on our events that include networking, education, and pitch competitions for startups, check them out at www.projectmedtech.com. We even have sponsorship options if your company is also dedicated to accelerating medical technology to impact patient lives. So reach out today to get involved. The Project MedTech podcast is proudly sponsored by Ward Law. Ward Law Office LLC is a boutique law firm specializing in the practice of patent and trademark law. They are committed to providing inventors, entrepreneurs, and businesses of all types with personal and professional services and are flexible to meet your unique needs. It is their goal to both educate on how to secure valuable patent and trademark protection and to provide high-quality services at rates affordable to independent inventors, startups, and small businesses alike. Without further ado, let's dive in.
Sweet. Brent, Ankit, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Dwayne. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ankit, obviously Project MedTech's been working with UGen for a little while now, so we're really familiar with who UGen is, the story. But for our listeners, it'd be good if Ankit, you do an introduction to yourself and kind of leading into UGen, and then Brent, I'll kick it over to you, and you can give an introduction to yourself and maybe a little bit about your engagement with UGen.
Sure. So, UGen really started from my personal experience back in the day. So I finished my education, and then I was deciding what I want to do with my life. And at that point, my grandfather passed away from Parkinson's disease. So I knew how he's gone through his journey of facing Parkinson's and how the family gets, faced with the same situation. So I was like, his movements were really, really affected by that condition. So I decided to do something about it, use my skill set in that space, and thought of coming up with movement sensors that can help people with Parkinson's. And that's really how UGen really started, right? We developed the sensors, we made the solutions very early on, prototypes, and got some understanding of the medical field and saw how this can impact physical therapy.
Yeah.
With that in mind, we scaled our team, we got some funding, and now we are here in Ohio and Project MedTech. We're working with you, I know that.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very happy to be here at UH, and then work with UH, and then launch the product.
Yeah, Ankit, what was your background in that? Because my grandfather went through had Parkinson's, and it does, like, there is you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but the toll it takes on not just the patient but the family members as well and everyone involved. I mean, it is a difficult disease to have, but also be a bystander of and have a family member of, right? And so, for you to say, okay, I can solve this with my skill set. What was that skill set?
Yeah, so I got my undergraduate in electrical engineering from Georgia Tech, and then I got my PhD from University of Virginia, and had a great opportunity to research with NASA Langley and National Institute of Aerospace. So I was positioned there while I was finishing my PhD, and in that process, I picked up some skills on sensors. I just learned engineering,
Yeah.
and I thought, okay, what better way to put my skill set to use to solve my problem, but also problems that a lot of society and people face.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what helped me trigger into this company.
Yeah, I love that. And so about 65% of our listening base is US based and the rest is international. So for the U.S. based, but also mostly for the international folks as well. Georgia Tech and Virginia are two top tier biomedical engineering programs in the U.S. Both have really good also commercialization arms as well. Like I think they do a very good job of kind of thinking through, could this be an actual product, an actual company? So two really good institutions it came from. Okay, so let's pause there and Brent, give you a chance to introduce yourself, your background, and then how you met the UGen team.
All right, yeah. So I'm actually a physical therapist. So I went to my graduate school at NYU, worked out in New York for a little while. I'm originally from the Northeast Ohio area. So when me and my family were moving back here, we decided to join UH as an employee. I've kind of established myself at UH to work very closely with our sports medicine department. That kind of was what opened the door, or at least got me engaged with UGen. So some of what we do with the sports medicine department is we're just trying to figure out, what's in the market, what gaps are there to caring for our athletes, and that's both, healthy athletes and injured athletes. And that like afforded us a lot of opportunities to meet with a lot of different tech companies. And UGen was one of the ones that we kind of got introduced to very early on. And we kind of saw the possibilities for UGen to really make a positive impact for rehab and even things beyond rehab. And I would say early on in the meetings, I just kind of picked up on that with me being the physical therapist in the group of representatives for UH. It kind of just made the most sense that, Ankit and others within that organization, we just kind of connected, and we've pretty much been in touch for, I don't know, maybe 18 months, maybe a little bit longer now,
Yeah.
at trying to get this across the finish line.
Yeah, it's super cool. Brent, can you kind of um, give just a quick overview of university hospitals and it's maybe bet in the sports tech market, right? Because I know there's Dr. Voos, who's the Browns doctors involved and in the NFL, and then we have the Haslams and we have Sportsland that UH hosts. There's a lot you all are doing in the sports tech world. Maybe just an overview for the listeners in, University Hospitals is in Cleveland, Ohio, and
Yeah.
and yeah, I'll help with that a little bit.
Yeah, so you did touch a lot on a lot of these points. So University Hospitals is based out of Cleveland, Ohio. Um, Dr. James Voos is the head team physician for the Cleveland Browns. He's the leader with us for orthopedics and sports medicine.
Okay.
Him and Dr. Kelsey, Dr. Slud, and I work very closely together to help kind of grow sports rehabilitation. This has really been something that they've focused on even long before I got here at University Hospitals. But we've really seen a lot of growth, I'd say, in the last 3 years. Once we opened our Jasinski Sports Medicine Institute, it kind of got us all under one roof. Gave us a lot of opportunities to do some cutting edge research within sports medicine, sports rehabilitation. And the other thing that it's really brought on is this other arm within our organization called the Haslam Sports Innovation Center, which has given us the opportunity to look into a lot of different tech companies, all geared around medical technologies, and I would say with a more interest in the athletic realm. And that's what brought on Sportsland. That's what opened the door to UGen. And I think it's that we all have the understanding that we have a gap in the level of care that we can provide to our athletes. No matter how much we try and where we are right now, we know there's still, opportunities to be better. And whether that is, improve our rehabilitation standards, surgical procedures, recovery timelines, injury prevention. And we know that the future is going to be in technology. And it's those things that maybe we hear about or we wish existed, but we don't know what they are until we see them. And that's where that Haslam Sports Innovation Center has played a key role, because it's gotten us the opportunity to sit at tables with companies who have grand ideas, but they don't really know the medical space, right? And that's where we can come in and say, well, we know the medical space, but I don't know how to build something. And that's how we can work together.
Yeah, it's it's super interesting to we work with quite a few companies in the sports tech space, and I think for a long time traditional med tech would oftentimes look at the sports tech space and say, yeah, the market's just not big enough, right? There was always this like, well, I need to solve the stroke problem first, right? How do I get a blood clot out of the brain? And that was more vital than kind of getting into sports tech. But I think that what a lot of people have found is that the same way people want to live longer in healthcare in general, they also want to live longer, healthier lives. And that is that play with sports tech. And I think you're finding that, yes, athletes are really concerned with this, but also just the everyday person is concerned with this. And so I'll give you an example, which, UGen is obviously making a really good splash here on the athlete side. I think Ankit, you guys were just at the NFL Combine a few weeks ago, or about a month ago now at the time we record this. But my wife is a physical therapist, and she met with some of Ankit's team, Chad and Mike, a while ago. She does everything on the skilled nursing side of things. And, obviously UGen has shown there's a big demand in the sports side, but she kind of looked at it right away and said, oh my gosh, if I can get a patient to use this, it's so easy to use, there can be some real applications there. So I just think it's just so interesting to watch how fluid sports is with just general healthcare, and I think it was looked at as two separate things for such a long time. But yeah, go ahead on, kid. It looks like I'm sure you have something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think to build on what Brent was saying and to add to exactly what you're saying, this actually goes back to the fundamental problem that physical therapy as a field faces, right? I mean, if you look at some data from APT or 2021 back in the day, they said there's only 72 physical therapists for every 100,000 people in the US.
Wow.
Now that number can mean a lot of things. It means you probably have, delayed appointments. There's a lot of burnout from the PT perspective when you're being asked to do way more quality care for your patients when you only have so many PTs. That also alludes to the shortage of PTs that we anticipate as we go forward. Now, you spoke about, through, your wife just picked it up exactly. And now you bring that to the patient side. There's millions of people who go to, PT, and hundreds of million visits take place, but 70% of them drop out. They do not complete care, physical therapy, and real life gets in the way. It's like, hey, can I take out time from my work, right? Can I take a day off, or 3 times a week, drive time? There is snow, there's, cold weather. Many reasons lead to this dropout. So to that very point that your wife identified is like, if there was a technology, and like how Brent was saying, if there is a technology to build and fill this gap, right, and address both sides, the physical therapists and the patients, and allow them to complete care while they're at home, it's a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really why I think what we stand for.
Yeah. So let's do this. You just identified a whole litany of problems. I'm going to add a couple, and then Brent, I'd love for you to add a few more in terms of problems you saw, and then Ankit, I'd love for you to do an overview of the technology. I've had the opportunity to see this a number of times in action, and I can tell you how ridiculously easy it is to use and how intuitive it is. But you kind of hit on a couple problems, and I think that there's the shortage is crazy, and some of the other things that has been validated in literally episode 254 of this podcast. I talked to a stroke physician, and he said, I asked him where he was excited about the industry. What are some areas that you are excited for innovation? And he said, time to diagnosis. How quickly can you get them to see me? And how quickly can I get them to therapy? Those were the two things that he mentioned right off the rip. So it further validates this need for physical therapy. The other piece too, that is so interesting is in these rural areas, which you were mentioning as well, where it's difficult to get to physical therapy locations. And I watched this with my dad, who is only 5 minutes from his physical therapist, right? But he just had back surgery. He's 5 minutes from his physical therapist. He sees him once a week. He's still calling my wife and asking, hey, how do I do this stretch again? Can you look at this video? Am I doing this the right way? There's no feedback. And even if you're a good athlete and you're at home, you have a tendency to cheat a little bit, right? And so if you can get real-time feedback, I mean, how valuable is that? But Brent, feel free to, I just kind of blubbered a little bit about like some different problems, but clean this up. And what are some other ones that you see?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you hit a couple of them pretty easily there, and I think some of the problems are very easily viewable. In other words, someone who doesn't be in healthcare can identify what the problems can be. So one of them is, one thing that we do right now in rehab, and I think almost every physical therapist probably prescribes home exercise programs. But for the most part, that information is just given to someone with a video. There's not really any feedback provided to the patient while they're at home. There's very little insight that we are given as far as physical therapists outside of maybe them doing the honor system of saying they completed it or seeing how much time they were actively, logged in. So that's a huge gap because in reality, even if I see someone 2 times a week for an hour, that's only 2 hours out of their entire, plan for that week. So that home exercise component can be a big, make or break it in terms of if they're hitting their goals, if they're not hitting their goals, are they making progress? So if we can improve that compliance and also just make sure it's being done correctly and give me information that can make my visits more valuable. So, me and Ankit have talked about it before in terms of, I can give him a home exercise program and he might be doing it every single day and he's going to come into clinic and my first discussion with him is going to be, how is this week going? How are you feeling? How are your exercises? Did you have any trouble with anything? I can probably cut that entire conversation if he's using UGen every single day because I could go log in. I could see, okay, he's done his exercises 5 days a week. He's reported no pain. His maximum range of motion was 170 degrees, whatever it was. So when he comes in, I already have information. So I can say, hey, it looks like you had a great week. Do you have any questions for me? How are you feeling? Feeling great. Awesome. I don't have to go and spend all this extra time asking questions, trying to figure out what is going on while he's at home. So now my session's more valuable.
I love that.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think that's a big thing right there because I'm saving time in the clinic and then he's also getting more value while he's at home.
Right. And Brent, to clear some of that up too, is that because the insurance only covers so much time with a patient?
Yes, I mean, and I wouldn't even say like that's the biggest reason. It's just, in reality, Anki kind of mentioned it too, where people are not going to come into physical therapy every single day. So even if insurance were to say, hey, we're going to cover PT every
Mhm.
single day, in reality, people don't have 5 days a week to come in
Sure.
and spend 45 minutes or an hour with a physical therapist. And in reality too, is if every patient did want to come in 5 days a week, there'd be minimal patients that each therapist could touch, right? We can only get so many people in a day. So if we're seeing the same person every single day, that can become a challenge in terms of access. So if we're improving the quality of care that people are able to get when they're not in the clinic, that's going to make their progress better. It's going to make their time, valuable inside and outside the clinic. I think the other thing too, which is like kind of in the same vein, there's been tons of times where people aren't making the progress that we want, whether it be non-operative or operative. And that can be a challenge because, again, it's the honor system. So you could have somebody that comes in and you gave them home exercises and they say they've been doing them, but maybe they haven't been doing them and they're not making progress. Then now I'm kind of doing the problem solving in my head of, okay, what I'm giving them isn't working. I was like, what I provided them is not working. We're doing things in session. They're making some progress, but they're reverting back, every single time before they come in. If they were using UGen, then I could actually see, are they actually doing what they're supposed to do? Because that could have been the missing piece. Maybe they come in and they don't want to tell me they didn't do their exercise this week. They don't want to tell me they haven't been doing either stretches or their range of motion. And that's why they're not making progress. So in scenario A, if I don't know, and then I take their honor as, hey, you told me you did all your stretches every single day, I'm going to keep changing my plan to figure out what sticks. When in reality, it could have just been you just haven't been doing what you're supposed to do, and that's why you're not making progress. So I think it takes some of the guesswork out of what's happening outside of the clinic space.
Okay, I love that. All right, so I think we've touched on a lot of the problems here. Ankit, let's kind of go through what is the innovation, and if you can, while you're talking through it, obviously there's got to be some competitors in the space. So just walk through why you made specific decisions, why use sensors, why not use video feedback, how does all that work, and kind of walk us through that.
Okay. Let me first describe to you what UGen system is in totality, and that way I can use that as a framework to describe what you just asked.
Perfect.
So we build wearable sensors, everything in house, and that wearable sensors connect with our applications, which is a patient facing application and then a clinician facing solution. So these three work hand in hand. The premise of UGen really stands on three pillars. One is both of you touched on, was feedback. We knew from day one that if somebody has to complete physical therapy, recover correctly, be very effective, feedback is essential. And the only way to give, I would say, uh, changing or positive feedback is by having wearable sensors track motion in 3 dimensions, because we move in 3 dimensions, right? So when you're doing exercises, that's in 3 dimensions. So the wearable sensors track 3 dimensional motion and then give feedback to the user in real time in multiple ways, through haptic, through sound, and through video on the patient facing app. So now you're really touching on different sensory inputs of the user, of the patient, and each one of them is training them how to move correctly. So that's where the wearable sensors really stand very different and unique as compared to what we've seen in the market. Now, you pair that with the data that we collect for the clinicians. And this is where we really wish to change clinical care, or at least advance clinical care. Is now someone like Brent, if he were to give the UGen solution to, let's say, 500 of the same ACL diagnoses patients, let's say, now he has a data where he can actually go and see what the range of motion the patient is receiving, or at least achieving, what incorrect movements they're doing, what correct movements they're doing, and how many sets and reps are they completing along with other data. Now you combine this over 500 ACL, the same diagnoses, and you can pretty much pinpoint and say over time that, hey, looks like these 7 exercises or these 6 exercises give me the best outcome. Today, if you go and go to different PT clinics and be like, hey, I've got an ACL injury, somebody's going to give you 10 exercises, somebody's going to give you 6, somebody's going to give you 5 or 12 or whatever, right? So we almost somewhere bring data as a value to clinicians to say, yes, this is what's actually working, right? Measurable data from the wearable sensors into the clinical app. So, so those are the three big elements, right? And now, if you want to say what really makes us unique from the technology perspective is the whole real-time feedback ability to give in real time, because humans adapt in real time. The concept of neuroplasticity kicks in, right? You spoke about, somebody who was working with stroke. Neuroplasticity is huge with stroke patients. You know, it's almost as like, if you teach wrong movements, you're going to learn wrong movements. If you teach right movements, you will learn right movements. So the sensors, once you wear them on the body, and as you're doing your exercises, they correct you. For instance, let's say you're doing a shoulder flexion or raising your arm in front of you. If you rotate your wrist incorrectly, it's going to tell you, hey, don't rotate your wrist, right? Or, hey, go slow, you're going too fast. So these corrections come in real time, and that makes the PT experience at home very, very unique. And you almost feel you're engaged and you're connected. So then you're more likely to follow through your therapy protocol. And similarly, the PTs like Brent and others get that data to now clinically decide where can I intervene, or where can I see what's happening, call in the patient if they need to, or, oh, the patient is doing great, keep doing, right? I'm going to give you a new set of exercises over the air. So this is kind of the solution that I wanted to discuss about. But please tell me if I've not touched on any of those specific things.
No, this is great. I've seen the demo. Well, I've seen it a lot, but then Chad and I went to a career day for biomedical high school students, and he
Oh
must
yeah,
have
great. Yeah.
he must have done 150 shoulder raises, and
Yeah.
but the real time feedback in terms of what I was just so impressed with was, yes, the speed, right? I was like, oh wow, that's pretty cool that you could do the speed, but then it was, oh, the wrist was rotated 10 degrees instead of being flat, and it would pick up on that and say to do it again. And then just how clean the user interface was to go back to a PT and say, okay, cool, he was 8 for 10, 3 for pain. It was really cool how that all loaded into there and how quick it was done. And so it is really intuitive. So my next question is, yes, obviously you're having really good success with maybe some of the more ortho physical therapists, right? But Chad makes a point to say, my mom can use this device, right? So talk to me a little bit about where you think this could expand into. You obviously at first really thought about Parkinson's disease, having really good success in the sports play, ortho play, but it can definitely be used in other areas. So just kind of walk us through maybe the thinking of why start with sports and where could it go to?
I can say a bit, and then obviously Brent can add way more on the sports
Yeah.
side, right?
Yep. Yeah.
But from my perspective, I know the whole initial inspiration is around neuro because it is a pain point that I lived through, right? But we are launching with MSK or orthopedic because the exercises are very structured. There's a lot of set protocols for a lot of common diagnoses, and MSK and orthopedic based injuries and rehab is one of the significant factors that lead to impacting people and also a huge economical impact on the U.S. economy from a healthcare perspective. So it's a significant chunk,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really why we initially started with the MSK and orthopedic side. But Brent can add on to more to it from the clinical perspective.
Yeah, I mean, from the clinical side, I think it is easier to say from an orthopedic standpoint. It's kind of probably the first, large bucket of population to look into. In sports, there's a significant overlap. So sports is like going to be a subset of the orthopedic population. In reality, it was kind of driven by UGen. That was kind of what you guys were going into. It made the most sense. And I think the big thing is that this isn't an easy task for them to accomplish. And just within the orthopedic realm, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of exercises that they need to program and build. And there's going to be overlap that, some of the neuro patients, cardiovascular are going to still need to use orthopedic based exercises. There'll be overlap. But to try to accomplish that goal between multiple different disciplines would be very, very challenging. So I kind of agree with them that going orthopedics not only makes the most sense from maybe ease of building the exercises, but trying to capture as much of the population in the market as you can.
Yeah. Ankit, I want to ask you one more question as it pertains to to UGen, and then we can talk a little bit more about. I have some other questions for both of you, but if where do you see UGen going in the next 2 to 5 years? And actually too, I want to circle back to this because I did ask about this, and maybe you can kind of use this in leading up to it. But why was UGen at the NFL Combine? What were you doing there? How did that go? Was it super interesting to see these freak athletes getting to compete? It's so crazy watching some of the stats every year. But yeah, just curious what that was like and what you did there, and then talk to me about what can we expect from UGen in the future.
Yeah, so I can address the NFL first. So NFL Combine was great. It was one of the best events and conferences we could have been to. Like, it was phenomenal. Um, it was a very catered audience. There were a lot of orthopedic surgeons there, obviously, and there were selected companies. So we were very happy to be there. We also were a sponsor for that event, right? So we really did that. And the surgeons and PTs, they were very open to coming and talking to us. We were having live demos. All our UGen team is great. Chad, uh, Colin, Ava, Taya, Rob Heiser, our CEO, was there. Um, all of us were there, and then we were having all these orthos and doctors and coming in and like saying, "Show it to me. Let me see how it works." At some point, all of us were occupied. Like, none of us were free. So it was that good. It's very rare that 6 people from a team, 6 or 7 people are engaged in a conference like that when we were doing demos. So it was fantastic. Coming to what I believe, what I see, or what we see UGen going and growing into, if you're beginning with orthopedic space, where we definitely have a high potential of making impact in a much needed neuro space. We definitely see that. We already have some initial discussions going on to explore the stroke territory and stroke market and help patients there. So that's already in the talks. And even just orthopedic space, like assessments, right? We're talking rehab, but what about assessments? And of course, Brent can talk more about that. So imagine how you're getting screened for your blood sugar, whatever. But today, I don't know if you're getting screened for movement. Unless you have an aspiration to go run a marathon, an aspiration to become the best pickleball player or a soccer player, right? Okay, where are you at? Where is your movement strengths at? Are your joints and muscles functioning the way they're supposed to manage your expectations of becoming a star player? We don't know that. And that's where most of the injuries and fatigue creeps in. A lot of your strength training programs, your daily programs that you have to undergo and make your body go through without having real knowledge of where your body is today. We don't have a baseline, right? So what if you had that? UGen could be used there to establish baselines saying, this is where I am today, right from the movement perspective. This is what my training program needs to be, knowing where I am and knowing that I want to become a soccer player or a golfer or whoever, right? Or whatever. And then I cater to that program. And if I do get injured, UGen already knows where you were, what you're supposed to be doing. And now I need to rehab you to bring you back where you are. So that's where if you ask me where I see UGen or is really filling that trajectory from even pre-injury, very active towards helping you recover if you do get injured. And this plugging into a very healthy ecosystem with healthcare partners and clinics. That's what I see.
Yeah, Ankit, it's I think I think I can see in the video Brent's wearing a smartwatch. I have a Garmin on, right? Like, if anything has been proven from the Whoop, any of these wearables, is that people do care about remaining healthy, and it's okay to not play for the Cleveland Browns, but be competitive in other things you do. Like, um, from 2010 to 2014, which is kind of crazy to say that's 15 to 10 to 15 years ago. I used to compete in powerlifting, and I used to take my phone, set it up, and video my squats or deadlift or bench all the time, just so I can look at form, because there's what I feel and then there's what it shows, and
Right.
so uh, um now it's not like we were getting paid to power lift, but we took it serious. We were competitive, and so it's okay to be competitive with things, and I think people will pay for that kind of feedback. Like I don't know why I keep picking expensive hobbies, but I really enjoy golf and triathlons. And so it's like, to have some feedback on, am I remaining healthy? Am I moving appropriately? Am I having shoulder pain every week because of how I'm taking the club back and coming down? I mean, these are things that I think the general population has proven that if they're going to pay for an expensive wearable, they would pay for something like that too. So I think you're totally right on that. I think it's so interesting. There's obviously a huge health tech play to it, but there could just be a general consumer play to a lot of these things. Brent, I want to ask you, what are some of the other things in your space that you are particularly excited about? Because I think there is a big push for innovation in rehab, but also just keeping people healthy. I think a lot of groups think of physical therapy as, oh, it's you go to that after you have surgery or after you get hurt. But is there this world where you're going to see a physical therapist to say, hey, I'm going to go here once a month, so that I don't get hurt? I can tell you right now, and I'm not trying to lead you in any way, but I'm one of those individuals. I go every 6 weeks, just to like stay healthy with things because I like to be active and I don't want to be hurt. But I'd love to hear from you what you're seeing in yours, what you're particularly excited about. Obviously, UGen's one of them, but what else?
Yeah, so you honestly opened the door to probably like 20 different conversations that we could probably have right now. Just because the last thing you mentioned, it's funny because this has kind of come up as a conversation very recently within our healthcare system of looking at, can PTs almost fit like the dentist model, right? Like in other words, like you go see your dentist 2 times a year for preventative, care to make sure everything's going okay. And if there is something that isn't going the way they want to, they usually give you a warning of, hey, you need to start flossing or you need to do this because if you don't, you need a cavity, and you address it at the spot, right? Could PTs almost fill that gap when it comes to like general health and wellness? In other words, could you go see a PT once a year or twice a year just for a general assessment, just to ask the questions of, hey, I have this ache, this pain, I started doing these exercises and I've noticed X, Y, and Z. Whatever it is, can we help prevent people from seeking further medical care? In other words, can we kind of be that gatekeeper to say, here's an exercise program you should integrate because I noticed that you're very tight, throughout your hips or whatever it might be. So even though that's maybe not connected to UGen or technology, you kind of open that door with, should we check in with our PT every so often? And I think I don't want to say yes and be biased, but I think there could be a lot of, long-term health benefits throughout the health systems if we kind of view PTs as being like movement experts and ways to identify impairments or prevent future injuries. So that's a whole separate conversation, maybe not just for medical technology, but just since you opened that door.
Yeah.
I think from like a technology standpoint, I would say there's just been a huge shift in technology in rehab, and I think even like through athletics in general. I would say right now in rehab, we see tons of different information on how we can assess somebody's like strength, their power, landing mechanics, running mechanics, all those different things that honestly, when I was in school, we weren't really learning about, or if we did, it was you learned about like the biodex and isokinetic testing, and that was like the only option. There wasn't all of these other devices out there like Hawkin force plates or all the VOD technology or all these other ways to measure, force development and landing mechanics through athletes. And what we've kind of realized is that that's filling a gap in our care. So in other words, we thought we were doing a better job of knowing where somebody was at in the recovery than we actually were. So I think we were overestimating what we could visually see or what we could perceive through exercise alone. And when you actually are testing these patients, and I'm sorry if I always say athletes, that's the population I'm used to working with. But when
Totally.
we're testing these patients, we're realizing that we probably were overestimating like their movement mechanics or their strength. The easiest way to put it is, if we were doing return to sport testing for ACLs and we were to go back, let's just say even 15 years ago. Some places didn't probably even do any return to sport testing at all. In other words, it was just a time-based thing. It was like, hey, you're at 6 months, you're at 9 months, you saw the surgeon, you did PT, you're cleared, go back to sport. If you were a cutting edge clinic, then you were probably doing some type of return to sport testing, which might have been some hop testing, might have been a counter movement jump, landing air scoring system. So in other words, like somebody standing on a box, jumping off of it, landing, jumping back in the air. And then people were either just visually watching them or they were recording them on a video recording device, slowing it down, maybe drawing in some angles, things like that. And pretty much saying, hey, they're ready to go back to sport because they're able to do X, Y, and Z. But then if you put somebody on something that can measure like force development, it's like a force plate type device. I don't want to say one company because there's multiple. So if you put them on that, we're realizing that there's a lot of errors that it can catch that we can't. So like a simple weight shift or how explosive are they when they're jumping up? We're almost, there's going to be more often that we're saying somebody's landing with good mechanics, but if they were to land on these force plates, it's showing a different picture, right? Similarly, same thing can be said for strength testing. Isokinetic testing, I would still say is like the gold standard, but not everybody has the ability to do isokinetic testing. You also can't isokinetic test every muscle. So sometimes doing, different isometric tests or doing like a Nordic hamstring curl test or something like that, can give you different data points. And again, it might have been before you just, hey, you go do the leg press. Oh, it looks even. You can do 200 pounds in your right leg and 190 pounds in your left leg. All right, that's within a 10% deficit. You're good to go. But then if you actually have them do maximal effort through an isokinetic test or an isometric test, it can paint a whole different picture. So we were probably clearing athletes who were truly not ready to go back to sport, which can obviously lead to injuries. And I would say, as good as we are trying to be at measuring all these different data points, as much as we want to be cutting edge and paint this clear picture, we still aren't experts at. I mean, there's still re-tear rates with ACLs, and there's still things that we think we can do better. And I think that is where we keep wanting to explore technology. Can things like UGen help bridge some of that gap? Not only from their home exercise component, but as Ankit kind of mentioned, can we start to understand trends? Can we see that if somebody looks like this in the first 6 weeks of their recovery, can we kind of predict where they're going to be at week 12? And then can we predict where they're going to be at 6 months? Can we identify those outliers at both ends of the spectrum? People who maybe need more attention, maybe those who we can push the envelope a little bit more with. And in reality, not every clinic in the United States is going to have the same resources or have the same repetitions. I'm very fortunate that we see a ton of ACLs, and fortunate in that we have a lot of reps, not fortunate that people are tearing their ACLs, but fortunate that I can kind of know if somebody's hitting their benchmarks, right? If they're behind, or if they're ahead, or if they are behind, I have enough reps under my belt to know what to do to help them along the way. Versus there's tons of clinicians that maybe see 1 to 2 ACLs a year that they don't have that repetition to be able to pull on. Whereas if we can have devices like UGen or anything out there that's in the tech world that can help steer our clinicians and our patients, that's going to obviously lead to better outcomes.
Yeah. The there's a few things here. One, it's you're bringing up the real time feedback of like, oh, it looks like they're moving appropriately, but it shows they're not. And this is, like when I go do my kind of preventative therapy, we call it functional therapy. It's the same thing. It's like when I'm doing specific exercises at home, I think I'm doing them well. And then when I'm there and they're evaluating me, they're like, actually, you're really not moving your lower back independently. Your middle back is doing most of the work, but you can't feel that, but I can see that, and it's like, so it's that kind of real time feedback there. You can just see is so valuable. The other piece to this is, the data piece is just so interesting because I do feel like because we don't have these products like this aren't necessarily prevalent on the market. We don't have that mass data to say, oh, this is working when they do this, this, and this. It's not working when it does this, this, and this. Like, to me, Ankit and Brent, you both touched on it. Like, this just is like such a untapped market for having real data and not just like a meta analysis. Like, oh, they drank coffee and your cancer rate went down 30%. It's like, that's great, but we need some real data on this, and I think that's what is pretty exciting about what you offer. So, Kit, one of the questions I have for you as we kind of wrap up here is, in your experience in finding UGen and building out the technology, what are some of those lessons learned that other founders can take from your journey that you think would be beneficial? Because there's a lot of people listening in who are thinking about doing their own company, are in the process of it. Maybe they're a little bit further along, whatever it is. But regardless, what are some of those things that you learned along the way that you'd want to pass down to someone who's thinking about doing it?
In my personal learnings, I'd say that from the technology company. So one of the learnings from the technology perspective, one is hardware is very hard. Wearable sensors manufacturing is not easy. So it does take a lot of effort and pretty much everything you got. So if you're wanting to go into hardware or manufacturing based technology solution, just be ready for a lot of work. That's one. Two, I think just building a solid technology product, you really need to have a very good understanding of first principles thinking, I would say. A lot of fundamental thinking that goes into really what you're trying to solve, and then build technology for it and pretty much your why. So your why should be very, very strong. Like I knew that if this product were to go out, I would put this on my mother, on my father, on my friend. I would not hesitate a bit. If this were to be successful, this can go on anybody I like or I love. If you cannot answer that, then you're probably in it for wrong reasons. So, so that's a big self check, right? Hey, will I be proud to, share or put this solution on somebody I love, somebody I like? So that's number two. So really enjoy what you do, and your why should be very strong.
Yeah. Ankit, let me just pause you right there because we're going to agree a ton on this one. I used to harp on when I first got in the med tech space. Uh, it was on pre-FDA related things, and it was around the safety of medical devices. And people were always trying to figure out, well, I need to, how quickly can I get it on a person? And I was like, so we would talk about that, right? I totally hear what you're trying to say. How quickly can you get it on a person? But my first question to them always was, can you answer this question first? If your mom needed this tomorrow, or your dad, or any loved one, would you let them use it? Well, no, not yet. Then you haven't done enough testing. I mean, that's a pretty good
Yeah.
benchmark there. So I love what you said there. Did
Yeah.
you have more to add to that?
Yeah, just and then the final learning is exactly what you said, is healthcare. I feel like when you're in a healthcare space, there's a lot that goes around making sure that it fits correctly in the workflow. We keep hearing this all day long. Like we talk to Brent, like if this has to integrate in a clinical setting, understand the workflow very, very clearly. Because that is one of the biggest reasons why super tech companies don't get integrated into clinics is they disrupt workflow to a point where it doesn't become practical for healthcare participants. And you're working very closely with and Brent and others, and they're educating us on this workflow piece as we build this together. So understand that compliance, regulatory is always an afterthought, but start thinking that early on because it's a big pain to go back and do that, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's another learning. But if you combine all these three, these are, I would say these are top three learnings, and then a million others, right? I mean,
Yeah.
from like sleeping in the office floor to like building companies and getting rejected from potential VCs and stuff. That's just part
Yeah.
of it. But these
Yeah.
are like, if you had to take three big takeaways, this I would say.
Yeah, Brent, that's a great last one because I want to ask you about this, which is, clinical workflow integration and how big this is. Talk to me about um, uh, maybe when companies are thinking about this, what are some of the questions they need to be asking and thinking about? And you know, it sounds like you might be a little bit more apt to early adoption, but we always talk to all of our startups like this. You are going to have clinicians, and when I say clinicians, too, I guess speaking more to that too, it's not just physicians, it's physical therapists, respiratory therapists, occupational therapists, nurses, NPs. There's a lot of clinicians that are going to use products that you need to be aware of. But can you just kind of walk through some of the questions that you ask, because you have early adopters, so people who are going to see your technology and go, oh yes, I can integrate that into my workflow right now. And then comes the hardest part, and that's the laggers, the people who aren't the early adopters that you need to convince to start using your product. And so just walk me through some of those questions that people should be asking in order to make that leap a little bit easier.
Yeah, so I don't think it's cut and dry in terms of, I think there can be a hurdle on how can I integrate this, but if you see the value, and I'm very fortunate to work with a lot of physicians and fellow PTs that truly want to be better. In other words, like we're comfortable where we're at, but we know we can be better. We also have a lot of people that are very invested at, staying up to date with research, and just trying to understand the gaps in our care and what we can do to fix those. So I think when you have tech companies that are coming and they're trying to fix those gaps, you're sometimes willing to accept some disturbances to your workflow, right? In other words, like, hey, if you can, you talk to Dr. Voos and you just said, hey, I can make whatever your ACL re-tear rate is, I can cut it in half if you integrate this. He's probably going to do that, even if it means he has to do a little bit more work because he wants that improvement for his patients. That's always going to be for us as therapists, right? If you're going to tell me, hey, people are going to be more compliant or get better sooner, or not need as much therapy, which I know sounds not counterintuitive, but just have better outcomes overall, then I'm willing to accept a little bit more work into my day. But not everybody necessarily cares about that or sees those gaps. So I would say the people that truly just want to be, hey, this is not going to disturb my workflow. It is kind of like Ankit mentioned, like to understand and almost like live a day in their shoes of like, what does that workflow look like? Like, what is it like when that patient gets scheduled to the point that they're seeing that therapist, to that care being delivered, to what that home exercise program looks like, to what the documentation time is, billing, follow up, so on and so forth. And I think the biggest challenge is that no two entities are going to be exactly the same. So the workflow at university hospitals is going to be different than the workflow at a private practice, which is going to be different than a workflow at a hospital in Texas. They're all going to be different. So it's trying to imagine how you can be flexible, but also fit into these various realms. And I think we've all kind of touched on it to some degree, right? That healthcare has gotten to the point where we're trying to do more with less sometimes. In other words, we want to see more patients. Surgeons want to do more surgeries, have more follow-ups. We want to see more patients, but at the end of the day, we can only spread ourselves so thin. So how can we find resources, whether that be tech or other integrations that allow us to do our jobs more efficiently?
I love it. I'll summarize a little bit of this right here. We do an event in Europe every year called Coming to America, which is a spoof off the Eddie Murphy movie, and we talk about the importance of you don't need to be close to your investors. You need to be close to your patients, your customers, right? Because what you just described, you have to be there, watch the workflow, watch it from not just where your technology fits in, but patient in the door, patient leaves, whatever that looks like. You have to understand that full process. And so being close to your customers is just super, super important. So I love what you both described. We're going to have a link to a bunch of stuff in the show notes here. So depending on the platform, up or down an inch, we'll have UGen's website on here. We'll have Ankit's LinkedIn. We'll have Brent's LinkedIn. But we're also going to have a few other links. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're in this space, we'll put a link into Sportsland, which I think is in June this year. Brent,
Yeah.
do you know off the top of your head? Okay.
I think it's June 18th. I can
Okay.
look at it real quick.
Yeah. Regardless, we'll have that link in here in the show notes. We'll include the link to the center that Brent was talking about, and anything else of relevance to the sports tech play, because there is so much going on in Cleveland as it relates to this. So appreciate Brent, you and Ankit's time today. Hang on for 1 minute. We'll chat offline, but thanks again for doing the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
having me. It was great.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Freddie Coffey, Director of Marketing at Jumpstart. The Project MedTech podcast is proudly sponsored by Jumpstart Inc. Jumpstart's Trailblazer Accelerator helps Ohio's most innovative early-stage health tech startups fast-track their growth with tailored advising from serial entrepreneurs, non-dilutive funding to fuel their journey, and unrivaled access to a network of experts, resources, and investment opportunities. Whether it's improving patient outcomes, advancing digital health, or reimagining care delivery, Jumpstart provides the high-impact services and critical resources to bring big ideas to life. Learn more at jumpstartinc.org/startups.
Thank you for listening. At our core, we at Project MedTech are networkers, educators, and consultants. We meet you where you are to bring value and to create impact. We care deeply about helping medtech companies succeed right from the start, through to exit by providing consulting and fractional services, hosting impactful industry events, and of course, sharing incredible guest insights like the ones you heard today through our podcast. Please reach out at any time if we can be of assistance. Check out our website at www.projectmedtech.com or email us at info@projectmedtech.com.